Good morning, Carl, from Recording Studio, Oxford. Now I'm going to read to you The Tale of Mr Tod by Beatrix Potter. We're continuing our trip through Beatrix Potter. I have made many books about well-behaved people. Now for a change, I'm going to make a story about two disagreeable people called Tommy Brock and Mr Tod. Nobody could call Mr Tod nice. The rabbits could not bear him. They could smell him half a mile off. He was a wandering habit and he had foxy whiskers and they never knew who he would be next. He had half a dozen houses and was seldom at home. The houses were not always empty when Mr Tod moved out, but because sometimes Tommy Brock moved in without asking leave. Tommy Brock was a short, bristly, fat, waddling person with a grin. He grinned all over his face. He was not nice in his habits. He ate wasps' nests and frogs and worms, and he waddled about by moonlight digging things up. His clothes were very dirty, and as he slept in the daytime, he always went to bed in his boots, and the bed which he went to bed in was generally Mr Tod's. Now Tommy Brock did occasionally eat rabbit pie, but it was only very little young ones occasionally when other food was scarce. He was friendly with old Mr Bouncer. They agreed in disliking the wicked otters and Mr Tod, and they often talked over that painful subject. He lived with his son Benjamin. Old Mr Bouncer was stricken in years. He sat in the spring sunshine outside his burrow in a muffler smoking a pipe of rabbit tobacco, which as you will call is lavender, Carl. He lived with his son Benjamin Bunny and his daughter-in-law Flopsy, who had a young family. Old Mr Bouncer was in charge of the family that afternoon because Benjamin and Flopsy had gone out. The little rabbit babies were just old enough to open their blue eyes and kick. They lay in a fluffy bed of rabbit wool and hay in a shallow burrow, separate from the main rabbit hole. To tell the truth, old Mr Bouncer had forgotten them. That's sad. He sat in the sun and conversed cordially with Tommy Brock, who was passing through the wood with a sack and a little spud he used for digging mole traps. He complained bitterly about the scarcity of pheasants' eggs and accused Mr Tod of poaching them. And the otters had cleared off with the frogs while he was asleep in the winter. I've not had a good square meal for a fortnight. I'm living on pig nuts. I shall have to turn vegetarian and eat my own tail, said Tommy Brock. It was not much of a joke, but it tickled old Mr Bouncer because Tommy Brock was so fat and stumpy and grinning. So old Mr Bouncer laughed and pressed Tommy Brock to come inside to taste a side of seed cake and have a glass of my daughter Flopsy's cowslip wine. Tommy Brock squeezed himself in the rabbit hole with alacrity. Then old Mr Bouncer smoked another pipe and gave Tommy Brock a cabbage leaf cigar, which was so very strong it made Tommy Brock grin more than ever. And the smoke filled the burrow. Old Mr Bouncer coughed and laughed, and Tommy Brock puffed and grinned. And Mr Bouncer laughed and coughed and shut his eyes because of the cabbage smoke. When Flopsy and Benjamin came back, old Mr Bouncer woke up. Tommy Brock and all the young rabbit babies had disappeared. What a nasty man. Mr Bouncer would not confess to anyone that he had admitted anybody into the rabbit hole, but the smell of badger was undeniable, and there were heavy round footsteps in the sand. He was in disgrace. Flopsy wrung her ears and slapped them. Benjamin Bunny set off at once after Tommy Brock. There was not much difficulty in tracking him, as he left his footmark and gone slowly up the winding footpath through the wood. Here he had rooted up the moss and wood squirrel. There he had dug a quite deep hole for dog Darnell, and had set a mole trap. A little stream crossed over the way. Benjamin skipped lightly over dry foot. The badger's heavy steps showed painfully in the mud. The path led to a part of the thicket where the trees had been cleared. There were leafy old stumps and a sea of blue hyacinths. But the smell that made Benjamin stop was not the smell. Mr Tod's stick house was before him, and for once Mr Tod was at home. There was not only a foxy flavour and proof of it, there was smoke coming out of the broken pail that served as a chimney. Benjamin Bunny sat up staring, his whiskers twitched. Inside the stick house someone dropped a plate and said something. Benjamin stamped his foot, and bolted. He never stopped till he came to the other side of the wood. Apparently Tommy Brock had turned the same way. Up on the top of the wall there was again the markings of a badger and some ravellings of a sack caught in a briar. Benjamin climbed over the wall into a meadow. He found another mole trap newly set. He was still on the track of Tommy Brock. It was getting late in the afternoon. Other rabbits were coming out to enjoy the evening air. One of them was in a blue coat by himself. He was busily hunting for dandelions. "Cousin Peter, Peter Rabbit," shouted Benjamin Bunny. Whatever the blue-coated rabbit sat up with pricked ears. "Whatever's the matter, Cousin Benjamin? Is it a cat or John Stott ferret?" No, he's bagged by family, Tommy Brock, in a sack. Have you seen him?" Tommy Brock, how many, Cousin Benjamin? 7, Cousin Peter, all of them twins. Did he come this way? Please tell me quick. Okay, Carl, can you see the problem with the thought of there 7 being all twins? He had a sack with something live in it. I watched him set a mole trap. Let me use my mind, Cousin Benjamin. Tell me from the beginning. Benjamin did so. Yes, not 10 minutes since, he said. They were caterpillars. I think they were kicking rather hard for caterpillars. Which way? Which way has he gone, Cousin Peter? My Uncle Bounce has displayed a lamentable want of discretion over his years, said Peter reflectively, but they're two hopeful circumstances. Your family is alive and kicking. He'll probably go to sleep and keep them for breakfast. Which way? Cousin Benjamin, compose yourself. I know very well which way, because Mr. Tod was at home in the stick house. He's gone to Mr. Tod's other house, at the top of Bull Banks. I partly know because he offered to leave any message at Sister Cottontail's. He said he would be passing. Cottontail had married a black rabbit and gone to live on the hill. Peter hid his dandelions and accompanied the afflicted parent, who was all a twitter. They had crossed several fields and began to climb the hill. The tracks of Tommy Brock were plain to see. He seemed to have put down the sack every dozen yards to rest. He must be very puffed. We are close behind him by the scent. What a nasty person, said Peter. The sunshine was still warm and slanting on the hill pastures. Halfway up, Cottontail was sitting in a doorway with 4 or 5 half-grown little rabbits playing about her, one black and the others brown. Cottontail had seen Tommy Brock passing in the distance. Asked whether husband was at home, she replied that Tommy Brock had rested twice while she watched him. He had nodded and pointed to the sack and seemed doubled up with laughing. Come away, Peter, you'll be cooking them. Come quicker, said Benjamin Bunny. They climbed up and up. He was at home. I saw his black ears peeping out of the hole. They lived too near the rocks to quarrel with their neighbours. Come on, Cousin Benjamin. When they came near the top of Bull Banks, they went cautiously. The trees grew amongst heaped-up rocks, and there beneath a crack, Mr. Tod had made one of his homes. It was at the top of the steep bank. The rocks and bushes overhung it. The rabbits crept up carefully, listening and peeping. The house was something between a cave, a prison, and a tumble-down pigsty. There was a strong door, which was shut and locked. The setting sun made the window panes glow like red flame, but the kitchen fire was not alight. It was neatly laid with dry sticks, as the rabbits could see, when they peeped through the window. Benjamin sighed with relief. But there were preparations upon the kitchen table which made him shudder. There was an immense empty pie dish of blue willowy pattern, and a large carving knife and fork, and a chopper. At the other end of the table there was a partly unfolded tablecloth, a plate, a tumbler, a knife and fork, salt cellar, mustard and chair, in short, preparations for one person's supper. No person was to be seen, and no young rabbits. The kitchen was empty and silent. The clock had run down. Peter and Benjamin flattened their noses against the window and stared into the dusk. Then they scrambled down around the rocks onto the other side of the house. It was damp and smelly, and overgrown with thorns and briars. The rabbits shivered in their shoes. Oh, my poor rabbit babies, what a dreadful place. I shall never see them again, sighed Benjamin. They crept up to the bedroom window. It was closed and bolted like the kitchen, but there were signs that this window had been recently opened. The cobwebs were disturbed, and there was fresh, dirty footmarks on the windowsill. The room inside was so dark, at first they could make out nothing, but they could hear a noise, a slow, deep, regular snoring grunt. And as their eyes became accustomed to the darkness, they perceived that somebody was asleep on Mr. Tod's bed, curled up under the blanket. He's gone to bed in his boots, whispered Peter. Benjamin, who was all of a twitter, pulled Peter off the windowsill. Tommy Brock's snores continued, grunty and regular, from Mr. Tod's bed. Nothing could be seen of the young family. The sun had set, an owl began to hoot in the wood. There were so many unpleasant things lying about that had much better have been buried, rabbits' bones and skulls, and chicken legs and other horrors. It was a shocking place, and very dark. They went back to the front of the house and tried in every way to remove the bolt of the kitchen window. They tried to push up a rusty nail between the window sashes, but it was of no use, especially without a light. Okay, Carl, this is where we will stop the story for the moment. Join me tomorrow to find out what happens to the baby bunnies and whether Peter and Benjamin managed to rescue them. As always, love you to pieces.